coming, everybody. I would like to call to order this June 20th meeting of the Design Review Board. Will the board members and ex officio members please introduce themselves?
Cameron Boland, AIA representative.
Rick Blackburn, Historic Zoning Commission.
Perry Childress, Community Design Center.
Laura Cole, downtown resident.
Jared Worsham, downtown resident representative.
Suzanne Taravella, neighborhood representative.
Josh Wright, urban design representative.
Lindsay Crockett, planning.
Mike Reynolds, planning.
John Thurman, downtown development rep.
Matthew DeBard-Laban, downtown Knoxville Alliance rep.
Chris Ford, downtown business rep.
Alice DeArmond, Knoxville, Knox County Planning.
Christina McGrath, Tillery, City Law Department.
Mark Reel, plans review and inspections.
Thank you for that. Thanks for coming, everyone. The minutes from May 16th have been distributed. Does anyone have any modifications or concerns about those?
I did have a comment. I think they list us in the small assembly room. It's minor, but I think we were in the main.
That's correct.
So,
I can correct that.
yeah.
If there's no more, I'll
So make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Did we have any staff approvals?
Okay, the level 1 approvals since the last meeting at 3424 Gap Road. This was a new subdivision plat, creating 2 new 74-foot approximately wide lots, which extend to an unimproved alley. And also in Oakwood Lincoln Park, this was not at this address, but there's a new secondary structure. It's a 10 by 20 carport that meets both the design guidelines and the requirements of the zoning code. At 106 South Gay Street, we also approved the installation of a new exterior balcony in the exact location and footprint of the previously removed rear balcony. It has a concrete patio and 2 levels of wood decks. I believe that's it.
Thank you for that. And where do we go? We'll move on into the certificates of appropriateness. This is 0 West Hill Avenue, 4D24DT, and I will pass this over to Suzanne Taravella to act as chair.
I have a quick point of order. Similar to the last meeting that we had, I would like to make a motion that we suspend Article 5, Section 4 of the Administrative Rules and allow the applicant and the opposition speakers each a total of 5 minutes to present.
Can you clarify that?
In our administrative rules, we've got listed presentation.
I guess what I mean is, do you mean 5 minutes per person?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Minutes?
Yeah. 5 minutes per person.
Okay. I don't think we actually have to do that, but if you want to make that motion, that's great. So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second,
Okay.
but I have some comment too before we vote.
Okay.
Oh, you would go now? Last time, I was looking through the minutes. Last time, the rebuttal by applicant was 3 minutes. So we had presentation by opposition, 5 minutes per speaker, public comment at 5 minutes per speaker, the rebuttal at 3 minutes. And I just felt like if you have multiple 5-minute comments, 3 minutes may be more applicable to be 5 to be equitable. So I would, different than last meeting, but very similarly, raise that to 5 from 3 would be my friendly amendment to Jared's motion.
Okay.
Yeah, would agree with that. Do I need to restate the motion? Yeah. So I would make a motion to suspend Article 5, Section 4 of the Administrative Rules and allow the applicant and opposition, as well as the rebuttal, each speaker receive 5 minutes to present.
I'll say that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Motion passes. So Suzanne Taravella will take over, and I'll recuse myself.
I'll recuse myself also.
All right, thank you.
All right, let's get started on 4D24DT, the Hill Avenue project.
Okay, so as this is our third time, I'm going to give a high-level summary, and I'll highlight some of the revisions and the findings, but overall, I'm going to allow the applicant to clarify the changes made since the previous meeting. They are in your application packet. So overall, this is a proposed residential construction with 9 to 14 stories of residential apartments, above 5 stories of structured parking on the rear massing. This building is proposed for an L-shaped site at the intersection of West Hill Avenue, Locust Street, and Front Avenue. Reviewing the site access and layout, there's an access point extending from Hill Avenue via a two-way drive accessing the parking garage. There's an additional secondary access point that is located to the southwest side of the garage that extends off Front Avenue. In terms of the design elements, there is a massing fronting Hill Avenue clad in brick veneer featuring vertical metal accents. Revisions include a penthouse level that's clad in that metal cladding. The massing, there are 5 footlight entry systems that are spaced along the Locust Street elevation, and then the massing towards the river features a cast-in-place concrete garage clad in metal vertical fin screening. The residential section above the garage is C-shaped, surrounding an amenity level with a pool immediately above the garage fronting the river. So to recap some of the findings, overall, the site is proposed for a series of adjacent vacant parcels that have historically been cleared and currently used as surface parking. Part of the building is zoned DKG, whilst the south massing is zoned DKB. The block on Hill Avenue contains a mix of significant historic houses, historic multifamily structures, and a contemporary multifamily building. The south fronts Nealon Drive and the riverfront, and the architectural context is varied in time, period, and scale. In terms of the parking, the revisions in the parking include that secondary access point off Front Avenue that was presented for the previous meeting. Overall, the parking garage will generate that increase in vehicle traffic for Hill and Front Avenue. The guidelines recommend consolidating curb cuts and locating driveways near the mid-block when necessary and prioritizing pedestrian safety. The final site plan and the garage should meet city engineering standards. In terms of massing and scale, the guidelines recommend that building form be consistent with the character of downtown as an urban environment and reinforce the pedestrian activity at street level. So previous submissions separated the building into 2 large massings, one fronting Hill Avenue and running south along Locust Street here, and then the U-shaped massing fronting the river. The revisions for the June meeting incorporate variations in height, including new penthouse levels, to vertically break that large massing into what resembles 5 adjoining buildings, and then the step backs required by the zoning code on all street-facing elevations further contribute to that effect. Looking at the massings horizontally, this south elevation was previously 2 sections of the parking garage and the residential massing. The parking garage has received substantial revisions since the initial application. It incorporates metal vertical fins as screening for the parking garage. Those fins obscure the parking garage, and they are divided into 2-story sections, which you can see a bit more in the renderings, to reduce the visual scale of the garage. The incorporation of recessed penthouse levels served to further divide the massings on the north, east, and south elevations into the top, middle, and bottom sections as recommended by the guidelines. At previous meetings, the board has extensively discussed the scale of that south massing in relation to the context of the area. The building section on Hill Avenue is compatible in scale with the adjacent building, as it is just 1 story taller than that. The buildings along Hill Avenue step down from 6 stories to 3 stories to 2 to 1.5. The broader context is varied in scale, including taller historic structures, surface parking lots, the Bank of America building, and the City County building. So in the opinion of staff, the revised proposal is compatible with the context. In terms of the pedestrian experience, the guidelines recommend a pedestrian-scaled environment from block to block and encourage first-floor uses that are open to pedestrians and draw walk-in traffic. The revised drawings respond to the zoning code here and incorporate transparency on this level fronting Front Street. And then revised drawings responding to the code have also incorporated 5 storefront entries along Locust Street. You can see those doors here, moving down Locust. Revisions for the June meeting show the rightmost section of the ground level along Front, incorporating a series of storefront windows. The June revisions also incorporate additional landscaping details, street trees, sidewalks, and information on a proposed crosswalk along Locust Street, along with a proposed multi-use path. Coordination with the city of Knoxville will be necessary for additional off-site parking or pedestrian improvements. Overall, the findings related to materials, mechanicals, and signs haven't changed since the previous staff report, but I can clarify those as necessary. The staff recommendation is to approve 4D 24DT, subject to the conditions that the final site plan, pedestrian improvements, and parking garage meet city engineering standards. The landscaping plan meets standards of the city zoning code. Mechanical equipment or service utilities not shown on plans be placed on secondary elevations and receive screening as required. And then the signage to return to the DRB as a separate application.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. Is the applicant here? And just as a reminder, please state your name and address.
Yes. Gary Rogers with an address of 803 White Oak Valley Road in Cleveland, Tennessee, zip code 37312. I'm Gary Rogers with Origin Development Partners. We are partnering this project with Woodfield Development, and you've met Patrick Casson here before. And we're here today. We're excited to be back with you, and we're very thankful. We've come a long way together. We're thankful for this process. The Design Review Board's feedback, along with the neighborhood's feedback, has made this project better. We have a high level of respect for each of you. We take responsible development very seriously, and our track record for building beautiful projects that enhance cities and offer unmatched living spaces for great citizens speaks for itself. We're proud of this project. We stand by the way that we do business. So we're delighted to bring these revisions to you today. We think that this is a project that the city of Knoxville is going to be delighted with for many years to come. And today we're going to go over those revisions and in great detail. So again, we're very thankful for the opportunity here to come with you again today. With that said, I'll bring up Ben Hudgens, our architect. Thanks, Ben.
Good afternoon. The name is Ben Hudgens with Brock Hudgens Architects. Address is 530 Mean Street Northwest, Suite 105. That's Atlanta, Georgia 30318. I'm excited to be back again this month to present the refinements that have been made in response to previous conversations. So we'll jump right in. Lindsay, next slide. So I think the important things to point out here, there was a lot of discussion about the scale of the building relative to the Henley Street Bridge. So one of the big adjustments that's been made is to push more of the mass away from Henley towards Locust. So you'll notice that the bar on the left has actually been reduced by 2 stories before then adding back this penthouse level. What's important about these penthouse levels is we feel like creating some roofline articulation helps the building scale and creates this sort of terracing effect from Locust down to Henley. Next slide. You see that here. The buildings have started to break down into a more conventional tripartite scheme, base, middle, top, which is consistent with the guidelines. Again, we think that these additional penthouse step backs significantly help the scale of the architecture and improve the general building aesthetic. Next slide. The other thing that creating these separate building components helps us do is create more of a building of modules, all within an overall composition. But again, getting back to the idea that the scale on Locust is much different than Hill Front and Henley Street. Again, this slide, you see more of the undulation in the building from the parking, the step back of the residential, then the penthouse level step backs to provide a little more interest in texture in the building. Next slide. Next slide. In section, again, the terracing on the top is Locust on the right, Henley on the left, and then on the bottom, Front Avenue on the left, terracing down to Hill Avenue. Next. So the parking garage screening, We've taken an entirely different approach to the garage. Instead of the monolithic structural expression, we simplified the language, more conventional column grid, but applied these two-story vertical fins, directional fins, so that we can help decrease the visibility into the garage, at the same time still allowing the natural ventilation that we need for those garage levels. The two-story expression also helps bring the scale down, so it appears more of a two-story parking mass as opposed to 4 independent parking levels. In this view, you also see, sorry, Lindsay, you also see the terracing, as mentioned before. Instead of one big C-shaped building, the building steps down and provides a better scale at the bridge from the pedestrian experience. Next. You see that from Hill, again, this attic story that steps up there and steps back from the street facade. Next. The other important move was down on Front Avenue. In the interest of increasing the activation along front, we've introduced at the corner this habitable space. As you'll remember, the garage was set up to accommodate future retail along that front bay. We've gone ahead and included some amenity program here at this corner to help really bring activation there from day one. Next slide. You can see that here with the glazing on the corner. Again, the parking screen, those two-story metal fins, we think is a sophisticated way, timeless approach to dealing with the garage. Next. A view that we haven't shown before, but a lot of conversation about the building relative to the bridge and the location. We've gone back out, field measured, field verified, geolocated the building relative to the bridge. And you can see here that the building is actually set off from the bridge a good deal, both at the parking and above at the residential. Next. So quickly where we started at the workshop, step down, first ERB meeting, next slide. I continued to introduce step backs, next slide. And then finally ended up here. So you'll, again, introduction of these attic penthouse stories to help the overall scale. Next slide. And then you see that gray box ghosted in there was the original massing. You see how far we've come, reducing scale everywhere except that corner at Locust. Next. So again, we're excited to bring these refinements and look forward to getting your feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. We have several folks that are signed up to speak today, so we're just going to go in order. Next up is Joshua Thompson.
Joshua Thompson from Marietta, Georgia. Next slide, please. Uh, 3824 Fox Hills Drive, Marietta, Georgia. I'll be representing the landscape architecture and pedestrian environment. So what we're doing here is we took a look and provided the streetscape for both Hill, Locust, and for Front Street, providing canopy cover where we can, also a furniture zone, and then also foundation planning. Next slide, please. Within this, we took a look at all the plant material, made sure that everything is climatized and appropriate for this zone. Next slide, please. Wanted to provide a myriad of different bloom times, different textures, different colors. Also with the street furniture, wanted to make sure that we had a suite that corresponded with each other. Next slide, please. Wanted to take a look and break down those three frontages on Hill, Locust, and also Front Street. So next slide. This is Hill Street right here. Wanted to take a look at this so you can see that our building is stepped back. It's in the light blue. We've provided gracious sidewalks for it. Also, in doing this, we've been able to create a furniture zone and landscape zone. So you can see that we have a street tree there, right out front of the retail component, coffee bar and lobby area. And step back, providing a little bit more sidewalk capacity. Next slide, please. This is Locust, which currently right now is acting as a dead zone. There is no sidewalk. There is no pedestrian connectivity So what we're proposing is to provide that sidewalk. Also, where the road has a little jog to it, we're able to provide some planting, some shade with those trees and flowering shrubs and ground covers. Next slide, please. This one's a little more involved. So this is on Front Street. So with Front Street, we look at a couple of different things here, but really want to focus on the horizontal and also the vertical separation that we have from Neyland. One, we want to make sure that we provide a pedestrian-friendly sidewalk along our frontage along Front Street, providing street trees, street lights, trash cans, benches, and of course also the ornamental flowering shrubs and ground covers. But then taking a look at the separation that we do have from Neyland. We're separated from Neyland with Front Street slope. We have also there we have concrete wall. Then we have the termination of Locust Street, Jersey barrier, another grade change as well, then down to Neyland. So we're stepped back fairly significantly, horizontally, but then also vertically. But really want to try and focus on the pedestrian experience for our site and connecting it through on, and I'll continue with this. Next slide, please. So want to make sure that we provide as much connectivity within the urban fabric as possible. Right now, with our site, it's not really connected to the river, so looking at TDOT, working with them, providing connectivity across over to the pedestrian bridge. Want to make sure that our connection is well lit. That is also on Hill Street, Locust Street, and Front Avenue, making sure that it's safe for people to walk. And then also providing another amenity on the other side of the bridge with a dog park. Next slide, please.
Thank you. Next up on the list is Taylor Forests.
I'll be speaking likely in rebuttal.
Okay, next on the list is Brad Ellenwood. Brad? No, Brad.
I'm a structural engineer, and I'm here just for any questions about it.
All right, next on the list, not sure what you're signed up to talk about. Dave Madden. Okay. Gotcha. All right, next on the list is Josh Wright.
Thank you. I'm Josh Wright, 608 West Hill Avenue. I have to make 2 points. I concede Neyland Drive's current design creates a barrier to the river, but I do not concede that it is a permanent one that will forever define our city. Barriers can be removed. This happens when urban communities come together to make a change through boards like this. Have a look. One of the reasons I am an architect today is that when I was a kid, I visited Inner Harbor, Baltimore, Maryland. It was a desolate, deteriorating, industrialized area that had been transformed into something beautiful and exciting. I still have a kite I bought out of one of the shops. Baltimore reworked its hazardous brownfields and bypass road barriers into a space for the whole community and even the country to visit. Next slide. Stroud Watson worked with his community and adopted Baltimore's successful process to transform Chattanooga from one of the worst places to live in the nation to one that is visited by other countries to be used as precedent in how to make positive change in their communities. Chattanooga had to take over a state-owned TDOT bypass road and redesign it to connect the city to the river and create this rich urban experience. Next slide. When I grew up in Memphis, I was told it was too dangerous to go downtown, but I loved going down there. I have been excited to see Memphis take control of its own state-owned highway, Riverside Drive, that acted as a downtown bypass and barrier to the Mississippi River and transformed it into a boulevard with traffic calming interventions to create a beautiful system of parks, festival grounds, and museums that has increased economic investment with new residential restaurants and entertainment venues, and it has created community identity and pride of place. Next slide. Greenville, South Carolina had to tear down a state-owned bridge that was foolishly hiding a waterfall you can see in the right image. The pedestrian bridge replaced the car bridge. The barrier was removed and the river was engaged. And Greenville is now ranked number 4 in the U.S. News and World Report's best places to live. These are just a few examples I could show. Cities often make mistakes to create barriers to future growth, but those barriers can be removed and modified and made into catalytic social infrastructure. That is why this current site is in the DRB Boulevard District. That is why the DRB is tasked with upholding the full guidelines in all downtown locations so that any building, any new piece of this city can be a catalyst to improve the entire city. Next slide. Point 2, the board's decisions are consequential. The guidelines are there to help catalyze Knoxville's future into something rich and engaging, and this board is here to protect that future. Now, let's just imagine for a moment if the design review board never existed. Here's the Hampton Inn. This project was the catalyst for forming the DRB. It was one of the first new buildings downtown that was originally designed to be a hotel on top of a garage. And why not? Henley Street at the time was nothing but a bypass, but through a public process, city leaders worked to make sure that it would not remain that way. Next slide. What if they had not? This is less than a block away from the site. Is this appropriate for Knoxville according to our community guidelines? Next slide. The Hilton Garage, built before the DRB guidelines, and obviously not conforming. The new owner has recently tried to spruce up a little, fix the mistakes of its design, paint it away. I appreciate that effort. Next slide. But should we allow it to be the precedent for future development? Should we just build on top of it? I don't think so. Next slide. Here's the corner of Church and Gay. This building is used as a precedent for the DRB guidelines because it engages the pedestrian experience and scale properly. And it would fit nicely in the Boulevard District with its plaza and Rowing Man public sculpture. Next slide. Is this design appropriate here? Will this 60-foot tall open garage create an acceptable streetscape? Regas Square, next slide. Regas Square was on the edge of downtown development. Because it is so near the interstate and on the wrong side of the tracks, it would easily be argued that it should not be required to engage the street, but the developer wanted to follow the DRB guidelines. And Regas Square has become a catalyst to revitalizing an entire district of downtown. Next slide. This building would not have had the same catalyzing effect. It would have relegated this street and this district to being a pedestrian desert. Next slide. This slide shows the parcels of land in downtown that will be redeveloped in the near future. They are consequential. They will transform our city. Please do not set a precedent that will give up the authority this board has to protect the rich urban experience of Knoxville by approving a project that so obviously does not conform to the guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up on the list is Zach Bearden.
I don't need to speak at this time.
Thank you. All right. How about Daniel Sanders?
Good afternoon. My name is Daniel Sanders. I'm 920 Volunteer Landing. I'm an attorney. I'm here on behalf of the Overlook Homeowners Association. We ask that you deny this application because it contains inaccurate information and because it fails to meet multiple design guidelines. First slide, the properties in the DKG and DKB base zoning districts. Go to the next slide. But it's also in the downtown design area. The Knoxville Downtown Design Guidelines supplement the base zoning district and increase the requirements for development under your review. This proposal is a major project. It sits on the riverfront, it abuts the historic Henley Street Bridge at the major entrance to downtown Knoxville, where 32,000 vehicles pass each day. This project is a cornerstone. It will be, as Josh said, it will be an example for many projects to come, and as members of the DRB, you are stewards of Knoxville's design. You should do the work of ensuring the guidelines are fully met for each project that comes before you, and this one in particular. You must get it right. Next slide. And getting it right requires accurate information. The applicant should at the very least provide accurate renderings, and this is important because Guideline B2C emphasizes maintaining sightlines to historic structures by requiring setbacks. To say the least, the developer's renderings have evolved. 3 months after this slide shows 3 months of evolution, and you can see it creeping closer to Front Street and further obscuring the Henley Street Bridge. Next slide. This slide shows a similar evolution in renderings. And you can see that it wasn't depicted accurately, and we believe that it's still not depicted accurately. Next slide, please. This slide shows a comparison between the renderings and an actual photo. Our team of design experts informs me that the bridges on these images match the orientation. However, the landscape renderings provided by the applicant is modified so that the building appears not to obstruct the bridge. According to the site plans, the bottom image is correct. This design will allow a parking garage to obstruct sight lines to the historic Henley Street Bridge. You, as a design review board, should provide a setback to maintain this important sight line. We've said that the design violates several guidelines, and we'll go through those in the time we have left. Guideline A3 speaks to parking facilities. 3A recommends against blank walls. The parking garage we contend is a blank wall. It's got no fenestration. 3B, the garage is not located under the structure or aligned with retail, office, or residential space, although it has frontage on Front Street. It does not engage with the public on Front Street. 3G, the access to the garage limits development to contiguous or adjoining spaces. Moving on to guideline B1, speaks to mass building in scale and form. Proposed design violates each of these guidelines. Guidelines encourage human and pedestrian scale at the street level. The garage is not at a human scale. And attempting to break up the building into modules at 60 feet above the street level does not conform to the guidelines. The surrounding buildings are 6 stories or about 60 feet in height. This proposal is 217 feet in height, nearly 4 times the height of adjoining buildings. Guideline B2 speaks to building location. C2, as previously stated, this obstructs the sidelines to the Henley Street Bridge. I got feedback. Apologize. 2E, it does not contain a pedestrian-friendly plaza or provide human scale amenities. Guideline 3B3, building materials. If you'll advance to the slide 8, apologize. Next slide. Next slide. Yes, building materials. It shows masonry and brick, stonework. The bad examples are like this design with concrete panels. Section 2 of the guidelines speak specifically to the Boulevard District. A1, no lawn or other landscape area separating this building from the sidewalk. That's important. 1C, it does not complement the architecture and landscape of adjoining buildings. D1, we contend that it does not allow for a plaza or quasi-public space. This is erected directly on Front Street, up 60 feet. If I imagine walking down Front Street at night between Maplehurst and this new proposed connection to the pedestrian bridge, this is not a place that I want to walk. It does not engage me as a pedestrian. I see that my time is up. We ask that you carefully consider the guidelines, seek adequate information, accurate information, and deny this because it doesn't meet the guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up on the list is Thomas Goldsby.
Thomas Goldsby, 608 West Hill Avenue. So in a strange way, I'd like to thank the developers for bringing the community together. The well over 1,000 signers to the Keep Knoxville Charming petition are testament to the broad opposition to this proposal, particularly with the realization that this is a 100-year structure that sets the course of development not only for this one little corner of the city, but arguably throughout the entire downtown vicinity. Through this common understanding, I've gotten to know people in the neighborhood, and beyond that, I perhaps otherwise would not have had the opportunity to meet. One such person is Mr. Eric Zena. If you'll proceed to the next slide, please. Eric is founder and CEO of American Accessories International with its corporate office located in the Bank of America building at 550 West Main Street. Mr. Zena is attending a certain sporting event in Nebraska this week, but asked me to read the following letter. The letter reads as follows. Dated June 20, 2024, Dear Design Review Board. Originally from the Bay Area of California, my mother brought me to Chattanooga, Tennessee in 1974 for my high school and college years. Upon meeting my wife at the University of Tennessee in 1980, Elaine and I made the decision to make Knoxville our home and then committed to the support of education at all levels within our community. We've contributed significantly to the Knox City Public Schools, as well as provided over $10 million in endowments and donations to the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. Unfortunately, I'm in Omaha, Nebraska, attending the NCAA College World Series in support of our Tennessee Volunteers, so I cannot be with you tonight. My hope is that you will hear my words just the same. I would challenge the comments previously made that the Design Review Board is simply expected to assess proposals against design guidelines previously developed in the past. Any past guidelines are simply guardrails for thought, and our community ultimately depends on your representation of what is in the best interest of our community regarding the positive growth of Knoxville. An error of this magnitude can negatively alter the entire landscape of downtown Knoxville and set a precedent for years to come. Once started, it is impossible to get back to the established visions of Knoxville that have brought us to today. In 2007, the city challenged me for my property to build a new central bus terminal. There was a significant gap between the city's assessment of value for our land and our appraiser's assessment. Congressman Duncan asked me where I wanted the decision to go. I knew at that moment the future of the project was in my hands. I told Congressman Duncan, quote, obviously we do not want to move, but if our moving is in the best interest of the downtown community and our assessment of value was being met, we would be wrong to stand in the way of the project, end quote. The next week, the federal government approved our certified appraisal and the project moved forward. Although moving from our former Chamber of Commerce building still had a negative consequence of over $500,000 to our company, I still believe it was my responsibility to support the needs of our community. My point is simple and clear. Difficult decisions must be made by us all, and it is time for the Design Review Board to properly represent the needs, wishes, and best interests of our community. It is past time to close this issue and reject this proposal. Sincerely, Eric Zena, President, American Accessories International. I concur with Mr. Zena. It is clearly not he who is clearly not anti-business. I am a business professor, and certainly I am not anti-business. Further, we are not anti-development. We want these lots in question to be developed and to welcome new neighbors and businesses to this quiet corner of the city. Yet any development must be in accordance with the guidelines that we all expect to be upheld. They are there for a reason. Yet we all, next slide please. Yet we all know that the city is eager to add housing and that downtown living is very desirable. Did you know, however, that the city is currently witnessing more than 4,000 units that are presently under construction within a 1-mile radius of the site in question? Add another mile to the radius and that number jumps significantly higher. You heard me right, more than 4,000 units under construction, and that does not include the university housing developments going up on campus at UT. Next slide, please. It is our hope that some sense of desperation does not tempt us to build an irreversible mistake. This is a 100-year structure. You and I might not be here in the year 2124, but this monolithic building very well could be. I echo Mr. Zena's words, repeated by many, many others here and throughout the region. Please reject this proposal outright. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Next on the list is Dina Markakis.
Hello. Thank you everyone on the board for your time. My name is Dina Markakis. I live at 608 West Hill Avenue, and I am a licensed architect. As you might recall, in the last presentation, I discussed the 1987 Downtown Knoxville Plan developed by the Downtown Task Force. One of the important quotes was, "A place by the river. The Tennessee River is a fabulous resource upon which we've turned our backs. The physical improvements and access to the river are high priorities. For reference, the Knoxville City-County building was completed in 1979. The 1987 Downtown Knoxville Development Plan quoted above is in response to this building. This proposed development continues the wall between Knoxville and the Tennessee River. Next slide, please. It also states Henley Street Bridge. As one approaches downtown from the south via the Henley Street Bridge, the city appears to sit on a green hillside. This vista should be preserved as part of any development which occurs adjacent to the Henley Street Bridge. Next slide. This is the view as you see here today. It still appears as a city on a green hillside. Next slide, please. In the next image here, you can see that there is now an opaque wall separating the city and the river. Next slide, please. I'd like to take a moment here to compare our Knoxville city plans to plans set forth in Chattanooga. In the late 1960s, the Tennessee Department of Transportation and the Federal Highway Administration constructed Riverfront Parkway as a 4-lane divided freeway to carry industrial traffic through the city of Chattanooga. This freeway created a division between downtown Chattanooga and the Tennessee River. With the decline in manufacturing in the 1980s and increasing air pollution, the city of Chattanooga launched Vision 2000, a planning effort aimed to improve and enhance the quality of life in the downtown area and restore the urban core and connections to the riverfront. Next slide, please. As a part of this Vision 2000, Tennessee Riverfront Chattanooga by Moccasin Bend Task Force, this was a publication that was published as part of Vision 2000. Next slide, please. This publication states, this plan states, these, as far as buildings along the river's bend, it discusses massing and what would be appropriate for along the river bend. It says, these buildings themselves, rather than being overwhelming towers or concrete or horizontal slabs, which would create a wall to the city behind, should be mid-rised terraced structures. Next slide, please. As you can see here, there's a map of Knoxville and a map of Chattanooga, many similarities. Of course, the Tennessee River. Knoxville, multiple beautiful bridges that cross the river, Henley and Gay, of course. In Chattanooga, you can see Market and Walnut. Both cities have a highway that flank the edge of the city. Next slide. Here you have a close-up. You can see Henley and Gay in Knoxville. You can see Market and Walnut in Chattanooga. Next slide, please. Here is a view in Chattanooga today. You have the beautiful bridge which spans the Tennessee River. Along the river, you don't see any large high-rise buildings. You see low-rise, so it still appears as a city on a hillside. Next slide, please. Here's also a more aerial view of Chattanooga. You can see on that north riverbank there, there's no buildings at all. It's a low park providing access to the river. Next slide, please. Here for comparison, you have the 1987 Downtown Knoxville Plan. You see the beautification plan here on the left showing the important views. As I've highlighted in yellow, into and out of Henley Street are the important views into and out of the city. On the plan here on the right, you have an urban form plan. They were very specific about what size buildings to put in the city. You can see along the riverfront, highlighted in yellow, where the Henley Street Bridge is, low-rise buildings. They put the high-rise buildings along the James White Parkway. That's what's in dark, dark black there. They're using that specifically as a wall to block the highway, not to block the river. Next slide, please. Speaking of city on a green hill, we have our River House North American elm. We also have an overlook southern magnolia. Measurements from a professional arborist have indicated that these, as well as several others, date back all the way to the 1930s. We have been encouraged by the Tennessee Urban Forestry Council to submit these as historic trees that bore witness to the construction of the Henley Street Bridge, and we plan to do so. Next slide, please. Urban planning documents regarding Knoxville and Chattanooga specifically were not to place a 20-story structure at the riverfront, blocking the city from the river. Next slide. You can see behind the building what it would be blocking, which is the beautiful city on a hill. Instead, you would have this opaque wall. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. I apologize for mispronouncing your name again. Next up is Wally Shaw.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Wally Shaw, and I live at 608 West Hill Avenue. Unfortunately, we're here for the third time in as many months to discuss a similar subject. Over that time, we've seen simple, minor changes that still remain unacceptable to what we see as a community, and it's been brought forward with a drip-like approach with nothing to change. I would like to take this opportunity to reiterate a few items that we called out in the past and additional items that we have to have addressed before we have further deliberation. For the first part, it seems like we continue to deliberate on a concept or a schematic, but we're missing specificity and actual specifications that we need to consider before approving. From this view, what you will see on the screen is a current view from the Gay Street Bridge, looking west towards the Henley Street Bridge, with Front Street featured as an important reference point. If you watch carefully, next slide please, you will see the developer's implied positioning of the large garage apartment mass along Front Street as having minimal obscuring Henley Street in the rendering. However, if you go to the next slide please, you will actually see the positioning of the mass on and along Front Street, with the structure very much obstructing and obscuring a considerable share of the bridge and the architecture of over Neyland Drive. If you'll slowly progress to the next couple of slides, you can see the rendering versus actual comparison. Additionally, moreover, traffic continues and will be an overall problem. Sorry, go to that slide, I apologize. Where I referenced, if you go to the next slide. Thank you. For instance, some of the basic information whenever I said we were missing specificity, some basic information of the building on Hill Avenue is inconsistent. Paragraph 1 of the application indicates 6 stories, while 2 paragraphs later, the building is referenced as 7 stories. Which is it? This seems to be pretty elementary to me and shows a lack of detail that we find within the proposal. Next slide, please. Moreover, traffic will be a problem in the current proposal. Locust Street has not been, and never will be, a two-way street. This has been communicated to the developers in a few engagements that we have had with them. Next slide, please. Further, Hill Avenue and Locust Streets back up routinely already when UT is in session. Not to mention that Locust Street serves as a vital access route for our emergency vehicles of Knoxville, downtown station, making emergency runs several times a day when the university is in full session. Additional concerns from making Front Street a more active interface with Locust and Neyland. This will call for a complete overhaul of a 3-way intersection. That route currently requires a multi-point turn with a 180-degree hairpin turn, so the idea of adding 300 new residents to this little corner of the city is totally impractical. My concern is the developers seem to be kicking the critical points like traffic down the road. Saying that the final site plan should meet city engineering standards doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand why working through these challenges as part of the proper scope and scaling of the project before approval is just good planning. There does not seem to be receptive feedback or interaction from the community in terms of our feedback to this proposal. Next slide, please. In the previous DRB deliberation, there's been discussion about trees and green space. Candidly, I don't see any resemblance or semblance of green space in the current mass concrete design. I also do not understand what is being contemplated with regards to the trees that presently exist. Not only is the development property on the property itself or any of the adjacent or adjoining properties that are affected by the design that have healthy, aged, and a real canopy of trees. Next slide, please. There is a retaining wall that is definitely required to maintain the integrity of the Hill Avenue structures and could be of historic value. Simply saying it won't be touched is unrepresented in the design and realistic. In summation, next slide, there are aspects of Hill and Locust proposal that we know disregard several critical guidelines. We also know the proposal runs counter to the city's vision and immense investments in the riverfront and the boulevard districts. So the project leaves me with great pause, with many questions. Frankly, I wonder why the project made it this far. Ultimately, I ask myself, is this the legacy that we want for our downtown? And my answer is no. So I hope you consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that concludes our list. So, Mr. Forrest, do you want to speak? Okay.
Okay, thank you. A couple of points. First, nothing we're proposing prohibits future improvements or redevelopment along Neelan. There is no barrier to future growth. We're trying to enhance what is currently an area incredibly unfriendly for pedestrians, creating new sidewalks on both Locust and Front Avenue. In terms of these, the building placed around the city, it's not fair to take a building out of its context. Those are all downtown intersections. This project is on a cliff. And again, we're doing everything we can to activate what is currently not a pedestrian environment. Rendering accuracy, all three or four of the views that were shown previously were depicted from different vantage points. So of course the building relative to the bridge is going to change as the perspective views change. The comparison slide with the two perspectives, or the two photographs, top and bottom on the screen with the red line, is also not accurate. Building face is 15 feet off of the existing pavement along front, which is not correctly represented. The two pictures are also not from the same vantage point. They're close, but if you look at the retaining wall, they're actually not. Again, we went out, field measured, field verified the location of our proposed building placement relative to the bridge, and it has been represented accurately at this point. Last thing on the existing stone wall that's there, the stone wall will not be touched. We're set back off that wall. We have, it's in our best interest and everybody's best interest that the wall remain intact and maintain its structural integrity. So the wall will not be touched, and that's the way the project's been designed. I think that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Taylor Forrester, 1111 North Shore Drive, Knoxville, Tennessee. Here on behalf of the applicant, sort of pointing out Article 16.5 of the zoning ordinance incorporates and details the downtown design guidelines, the downtown design review board. Within that ordinance, within that section of the ordinance, provides that the downtown design guidelines are to be applied in a flexible manner to meet the needs of the development. The downtown design guidelines are not a rigid set of rules, but rather a set of principles to guide development. The board's role is not to impose any architectural preferences, as well as the design guidelines are not intended to bring uniformity in design or approach or to require any specific materials. Mr. Sanders made a comment that you should deny the request for the certificate of appropriateness on the basis that it fails to meet several of the guidelines. Again, as our zoning ordinance contemplates and directs us, that these are not a rigid test or set of rules or guidelines. These are, applied on an as applicable basis with every property being different, and we're not strictly attached to having to apply each guideline, ensuring that any potential development meets all those guidelines. Otherwise, nothing would ever be approved. Again, that's why the ordinance contemplates that language. Staff report sets out the appropriate or applicable guidelines in this request, has detailed how the design plans satisfy and comply with multiple guidelines, including comments related to the parking and the access being consolidating the driveways, the massing and scale of the development, giving examples of existing developments that are of similar nature, such as historic surfaces. I guess gives a varied context for what is around in this area. We have historic structures, surface parking, the Bank of America building, the city-county building. Staff has recommended that you approve this request. Staff, understanding the guidelines, applying the guidelines, is tasked with that interpretation and it makes a recommendation for you to approve them because it finds that it does in fact meet the guidelines. There was an issue raised about traffic or concerns. You know, that's not within the design guidelines, not within the purview. That will take place during the engineering review, whether traffic study or some other component. But again, just wanted to address that comment. And we ask that you approve and issue the certificate of appropriateness as recommended by staff. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak about this project? Okay, hearing none, we will open it up to the board for discussion.
Question. I guess this is directed at the architect. Ben, can you tell us more about the parking fins? I've seen them in elevation, I've seen them in rendering. Tell me more about the material. I mean, they're rendered as, transparent. I can't tell if those are solid. Just a little bit more detail about what material, attachment, etc.
Sure. So the approach here, pre-finished aluminum 2-story fins, wood clip at the top and the bottom, as well as that mid crash wall there. But the proud horizontal bands would catch those fins, again, both top and bottom. Pre-finished aluminum, we've got to have enough openness so that we're not introducing mechanical ventilation and all of the headache that comes with that, with noise and other things. So, but we feel like we studied several ways to do this. The perf metal screens tend to be too transparent. The thought here was to actually use an opaque metal fin, but use the directional louver to help minimize the visual impact of the garage. And that's one of those things that once you get out there and you mock it up, it's probably going to be a field decision on what the angle of that fin is. But again, we want to create a nice timeless veil across the garage. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, are they rectangular in shape or in profile?
Yeah, rectangular.
Or at least at this moment.
That's right. Yeah.
And then maybe while you're, go ahead.
I was just wondering about color. Are they going to be anodized or powder coated?
Good question. Probably would be a Kynar coating finish, pre-finished, factory coated. It would hold up better than a powder coating. They could potentially be anodized aluminum, but at this point, we haven't selected a color, haven't gone that far.
My one thought is it's facing south, so the sun reflection as you're driving north.
Yeah, good point.
What was the public process or public input since the last meeting till now, if there was any? Did you speak to that at all?
Yeah, I'm not aware of any. I mean, our latest submittal was in response to the DRB discussions last month. So.
Another question. Can you talk about a little bit further down front? I see, I've seen the plan. We have the glass at the storefront for the artist studio, bikes, etc. What's the fins are on the second, third level? What's the plan behind the low knee wall, but below the fence? What's that look like?
Yeah, currently that's just open into the parking structure. The thought there is, as we mentioned before, that in the future when retail becomes a viable program here, we would love to see that activated with retail. The reality is that's just not the reality, so we're trying to activate the corner. Otherwise, the openness into the garage was in response to staff comment a while back about both the blank wall and the fenestration requirement for that openness. So currently, it's just open into the garage. Hopeful that before too long it would be improved with storefront, retail canopies, and signage.
got another one if there's no others. I don't want to take all the time, but the walkway that was presented to the bridge, I can't remember which presentation that was shown, but is that part of your scope in this project? Like, have you dialogued with the city of Knoxville about that, or is that an idea that you would propose as part of a future connection?
I'll let somebody else address that.
Zach Bearden with Origin Development Partners, 850 Morrison Drive. The actual multi-use path that goes over from the corner of Locust and Front Avenue is something that we've had discussions with TDOT during the planning process about being able to accommodate that just along the right-of-way outside of the church's property there. Previously proposed for another development was potential for life safety access to there as well. So.
It's hard to hear with the air conditioning, but I think you were saying that you've had discussions, edge of right away. It's been discussed, not fully, documented or vetted out, but
correct. That would be part of the.
There you go. That's good. I can hear.
Sorry,
I
I'm
can hear
getting
better now.
feedback here. So it'd be part of the formal engineering process and review as we go through that. But we've already had the initial discussions with TDOT and some conversations about potentially having life safety access there, and that was also part of the project that came before this project as well. So fully vet that out, and we feel that it's actually important to our project to activate this portion of the city that's really not walkable at the moment.
John, can I ask a clarifying question back to
Good afternoon. I'm Patrick Casson with Woodfield Development. John, you asked a question about the space behind the glass in the parking deck, or were you asking the space adjacent to the fen? I want to make sure we answer.
I was talking about the space fronting front that is not on the very corner. It's not really shown in the rendering. It is shown in the plans, or the elevations as being darker color. It's obviously it's not a storefront, but I didn't know if it was open, if there was some sort of, yes, that's what I'm referring to. I was trying to understand what that represented. That sounds like it's open to the left of the glass.
Yeah, that's future, that's correct. I just wanted to make sure we have programmed that space on the corner. So
Yes, I saw that. That was an addition to this project. So.
Is there, and I've spoken to this somewhat before, and there's feedback, I guess everybody's got it. Is there a version of this project where the parking is internalized? Is there a version of this where the parking isn't the face?
So the site dimensions would not accommodate a liner use on the garage. There's not enough depth from front back to the existing wall in order to accommodate a liner of units or a liner program there.
Even with reducing the amount of parking provided?
In order to circulate the garage, we need a flat tray of parking and then an ability to ramp. We don't have enough dimension to do both of those things and provide a liner use along that facade.
I have a quick question. So I think last time we discussed the landscaping around the kind of edges of the building, kind of higher up. It shows the greenery. Lindsay, it was sort of in that one rendering that you just had up. Could you pull up the rendering from Henley? Yeah, that one. So the greenery that's right above the parking garage, and then even there, kind of on top of the right-hand side and the left-hand side, what is that, and how is that maintained?
You're talking about the amenity deck, sir?
Yeah, the amenity deck, and then up at the very top of the building, the penthouses.
level.
There we go. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the penthouse level. There's greenery up there. What is that? Is that just something in the rendering?
So with this, that is the pool deck, and there are structural components to house plant material. That would be resort style amenities with pool, built-in loungers, outdoor club room amenity spaces that spill out, and yes, that would have planting available.
And then the penthouse level there at the top as well.
Yeah, so for the penthouse program, the expectation is that those are private unit terraces, walkout terraces at those penthouse levels. Planter boxes in that case with the vegetation that would be maintained by operations of the building.
Thank you.
While we're talking about landscape, can we talk about the elm tree behind the building and if there's been any studies, light studies done about the future of that tree based on the placement of this building?
To date, no ma'am, but there will be. We would enlist a arborist to come out there and take note of the tree, provide a descriptive care plan for the tree, set a perimeter around its critical root zone as necessary, and then monitor the tree during construction, before, during, and after.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or discussion?
Another question for Mr. Hudgens. There's been some discussion, I mean, it seems like we've seen a lot of renderings, like, from the applicant and, opposition and others. This is a little bit technical, but your site plan is based on, the drawings you've presented are based on a site plan that's based on a survey that, was taken and in CAD, and then you've built the 3D model based on that survey.
That's right.
Done the renderings based on that information. Is that accurate?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. I'm specifically looking at, the 2D stuff, which I would consider the most accurate due. And that's what I was based that on, but just wanted to confirm the site plan was based on, line work that was created from a survey. So
it is, certainly.
Okay.
The other trick to the bridge is the property line and front and Neelan are not perpendicular to the Henley Street Bridge. So even in that view, you can see that the bridge is actually angled relative to the building. So it creates some, sometimes some graphically challenging angles to get that right. That's directly out of the model that was used, or that was based on CAD, survey CAD files.
how did you get your information on the Henley Street Bridge? Is that through,
We drew it from the TDOT information that we're able to find, elevations and plans. Yeah, and it's surveyed. The bridge piers are surveyed, so where the bridge touches down is from the survey, but the actual elevation of the bridge itself is from TDOT.
Thanks. Sure. While you're there, you did step back. I saw the renderings. I saw the setbacks on the penthouses. I don't think this was mentioned in your comments, but you also stepped back on Hill Avenue, correct? Or is that different? Is that different from the last submission?
That's right. Lindsay, will you go to the rendered view from Hill? That's right. So part of the shifting of the mass around resulted in these sort of penthouse elements. So the objective here was to create that same inset at the top floor for all the building components. There was a comment earlier about the step backs not being effective at that height. Keep in mind that we have the zoning required step backs at the parking to residential, which happen on all three sides. We've just included these additional step backs to, again, address this, the pedestrian scale, but we also feel like it provides a little more articulation at the roof that brings a little bit more interest to the building.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
I think Perry's been trying to talk, so I'll let you talk first.
I just wanted Lindsay to bring up the view between the building and the bridge. That's a new point of view that I think answers some things, but I also wanted to say that this is a whole different building than we started with, and I really appreciate the efforts. I think that I feel like we were pretty well heard last time, and y'all have responded well. The penthouses give that top element where it doesn't vanish into the sky. It really is beginning to look like a group of buildings and not one monolith. Comes in there, the fins on the parking structure still sort of say parking structure, but at least it's not quite as obvious as before. But then the one thing that has come up and that had concerned me is the notion of it obscuring the bridge. And I think this does a good job of showing the actual relation of the buildings. And that indeed, if you were to get orthogonal to the bridge, the building does come forward of that first arch. The advantage of this rendering, though, helps show the distancing between them and that aspect you were saying to where they're not parallel to each other. And that is something that's opening up as you cross the river. So your view is going to be into the notch, as it were. So it's not as obscuring as it may appear from an east elevation. But I like, the balconies have really broken it up. The step backs, the lowering of scale. Our job, as both sides are pointing out, is to interpret the guidelines, which are indeed guidelines, not codes. And our job is interpretation of them without putting our own design desires and aesthetic to it, which is difficult for a board full of architects. And it's a bit of a different charge than an elected official, as we're an appointed board, and ours is more technical and less representing the desires of our constituents. It's looking forward with the assistance of the guidelines to what we feel as a board benefits the development, long-term and short, of our neighborhood. So, I think in this meeting we must either approve it or deny it and get out of the way.
Thank you for your feedback.
I had a couple of questions, just specifically, Mike, I'm going to lean on you for some zoning clarification. Well, number one, does this project benefit from proximity to public transit that allows it to have parking reduction? Do we know that?
In the downtown zone, there's no parking requirement, so they don't have to provide parking.
Okay, so that answers one question. So no parking has to be provided in the first place. Question two, does zoning allow, and I should be more savvy on this, but I don't have it, but like I've mentioned this last time, if that chunk at the back lowered to the street level and was street facing, maybe ground level retail, but units above, and there was no parking plinth below it, is that per zoning allowable? Eliminating the parking band that's there, the garage band, or is that more nuanced than what we can discuss right now?
I guess I'm trying to, so basically eliminate the parking, bring the building down, is that what you're saying?
It's basically units units down to the ground.
Yeah, there's nothing that would prohibit that in the Boulevard District.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And then also parking's not required, but we also have parking issues downtown. And I would say, I don't know that we can, I don't approve or deny without, there needs to be, like we do this with a lot of projects, we can't accept or deny a project that doesn't have a specificity on especially with the introduction of the fins. There needs to be a statement or reviews by staff, color choice and finish choice, so that it's not just left up to the applicant to make up what they choose. There needs to be some review of that as well. Right now it's rendered in my head as white, which seems like a continuation of the white stucco that's on the main apartment proper. So that's what I've taken it as, which is why that seemed amenable or acceptable in the design coming down as those fins was that white. That seems to match the stucco above. Is that how it's rendered?
Currently rendered as white, correct.
Right, and that's matching the white above on the white stucco?
The stucco will be more of an off-white so that it's not too bright, but
okay.
Yes.
Are there any other comments or questions? Hearing none, we can entertain a motion.
I would like to make a motion to approve per staff recommendation, adding Cameron's comment that especially something as important as the fins, that material be brought before staff and approved as a final material.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Can we do a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Childress?
Aye.
Mr. Worsham? Aye. Mr. Ford?
Aye.
Mr. Boland?
Aye.
Ms. Lynn?
Aye.
Mr. DeBartoleben?
Aye.
Ms. Taravella?
Aye.
Mr. Thurman?
Aye.
All right, that's 8 yes, 0 no.
0 no. Okay, the motion carries. Thank you. Thanks for all your work. Handing the meeting back over to our chair, Josh Wright.
All right, we'll move on to infill housing. This is 3440 Divide Street, 2A24IH. Lindsay, please explain.
Okay, so this was sort of one contiguous development, all proposed by one applicant. They were postponed in February to address some items I'll run through. While the designs, one of the conditions of approval was differentiating the designs. So the designs are no longer identical, but I am going to review them as a group to save time. We'll still need to take individual motions for each of these, but this is 2A through 2G, 24AH. It's 3440 through 3416 Divide Street, and I can run through the elevation drawings of these, but again, these were postponed in February primarily to address the foundation detail, to show the grade, the actual grade and foundation conditions on site, and to provide differentiation between the houses. The other recommendation was to provide windows on the left side elevation. And so again, as we can see in, and I'll show the site plan here for all of them. These are proposed to be set 23 feet 4 inches from the front property line. The block to receive new construction doesn't contain any other houses. The proposed front setback from the block is appropriate, and 7 houses will create a new consistent streetscape. Overall, the one-story 3-bay houses are proportional to the dimensions of the lot, and they are in the context of the broader neighborhood. There's no constructed alley on this property. And so the proposed alleys you can see here, they are on the sides, but they should be confirmed to meet the design guidelines for properties without alleys at least 20 feet behind the front facade of that house. Modifications may be necessary to meet city engineering standards. Overall, the facades are similar in width and scale to the existing houses in the neighborhood. The revised proposal includes at least a 12-inch tall foundation, and it slopes towards the rear with the property's topography. Just to provide some illustration of the differentiation, so here is 3440, and you can actually see it on the site plan. Basically, the applicant provided A, BR, which is a reverse, C, ARB, CR, so there was the reversing trick that the board does discuss sometimes, and so we'll run through 3440. 3436 includes a hipped roof porch. 3432 has a different style porch there. 3428. 3424 and 3420 and 3416. So overall, the applicant has opted to flip the houses and provide differentiation in the roof forms to differentiate these houses. The roof pitch and the projecting front porches have been revised to meet the design guidelines, and the revised elevation drawings incorporate some windows on that left side elevation. So staff is, and I'll just show you the recommendations for these. We will need to take votes, but staff recommends approval of 2A, 2B, C, D, E, F, and G, 24IH, subject to the conditions that the final site plan meets city engineering's, the driveway to extend at least 20 feet behind the facade of the house, and the final site plan include those trees to meet the design guidelines.
Thank you. Is the applicant here? Would they like to speak? Please state your name and address.
Dave Madden, 3735 Parker Harrison Way, Knoxville. We've reviewed the comments and we have no objections.
Thank you for that. Would anybody else from the board like to speak?
I have a question. Was that what you're asking? I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay,
So let's open up for debate.
Okay. Lindsay, would you mind go back to the elevations? Just, could you, as the applicant, speak to the differences? I mean, I saw it online, but I'm just, there's so many in a row, and we've been pretty specific about variation. I just would like to hear your comments on the variation, maybe in a little more detail than what Lindsay provided.
Well, we've introduced brick base coating.
So is that on all of them? They're all brick?
No, not all of them.
Okay.
Some have it, some don't. We did horizontal siding, we altered the roofing. We've added an upper window.
So do they all have upper windows and all have?
Just
okay.
depends on how the roof style works out.
Okay. So the pitches have changed, the pitches vary, or it's
Pitches
variation?
remain the same.
Okay. And then you've added windows,
On the sides.
but the front elevation has a window on some, not on others.
Like this one here has an upper window.
Yep. And then I'm sorry to be so picky about it, I'm just curious, so on that one, if you go back, there's no other ones there's one other one with a window, right?
The very first.
Okay.
It's a small house, didn't fill a lot there.
Right. And then no window. And then how many have brick, for example?
We'd have to go back and look. I think we can look at the elevation and determine which one has a brick. I believe we did 2 elevations with brick.
Okay.
The rear, does the porch not have steps to get down, or is this just a balcony?
Depending upon the height, we're going to be off the grade. We could put some stairs in. But it's a very small porch in the back.
Okay.
And your railing is wood?
Yes.
And is the color of the side, is it vinyl siding?
Yes.
And they're all different?
They should be, yes. It wouldn't be very nice if they were all the same. As well as the roofing
We
material
agree.
colors.
We agree, we just want to make sure they're not all the same.
But when you mean not all the same, what do you mean? In which way? In color or what?
We would alternate color. And the same thing on the roofing material, we'd alternate colors.
Sounds like you've mixed it up nicely. I would move that we approve based on staff recommendation, and can we boilerplate? We have to take a different vote on each one.
I believe, and I'll defer to Christina, you could also read those file numbers, 2A, 2B, and then you think that's...
I think that as long as we include the file numbers and make it clear whether or not we're going with staff recommendation or we're making any kind of changes to it, as long as we have those files number, I think it'll be fine for the record.
So I could move that we approve per staff recommendation applications 2A 24IH, 2B 24IH, 2C 24IH, 2D 24IH, 2E 24IH, 2F 24IH, and 2G 24IH.
Second.
Great, we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No, thank you. Let's see, now we have 112 and 114 Warren Avenue, 6C24IH.
Okay, this is a new primary structure fronting Warren Avenue. It's a 2-story duplex. The building is 30 feet wide by 49 feet 4 inches deep, and it has a projecting 1-story shed roof massing with 2 3-foot deep recessed entry stoops centered on the facade. The building is proposed to be set 14 feet from the front property line. Parking is located to the rear and access from the alley. So the duplex is, again, proposed to be set 14 feet. There's only one other structure on this block, and it does not conform to the base zoning. The proposed setback is appropriate, and the site plan includes a walkway to the street. The block to receive new construction lacks pretty significant context. It's relatively vacant and adjacent to an industrial site. The two-story, four-bay duplex is proportional to the dimensions of the lot. The overall form is comparable to an American Foursquare, which is referenced in the design guidelines. While the proposed entry stoops are not 8 feet deep as a porch per the guidelines, similarly designed entry stoops have been approved for multi-unit buildings in the infill housing overlays. Having recessed entry stoops, those are proportionate to the building and they're covered by a shed roof. Guidelines recommend that windows and door styles are similar to historic houses on the block. The large round arched windows on the facade are not compatible with the historic context, where houses should typically have double hung windows, so those windows should be revised to meet the design guidelines. The roof pitch is similar to the neighborhood context, the broader neighborhood context, and there are additional roof pitches contributing complexity to the design. The building is proposed to be clad in stucco on the drawings. Stucco is not listed as a recommended material in the infill guidelines, but it's not necessarily incompatible with the neighborhood, especially recognizing the context, so the board can discuss this proposed cladding. Staff's recommending approval of 6C24IH, subject to the windows or the conditions that the final site plan meets city engineering standards. The windows are revised to incorporate double hung windows on the facade or other window styles compatible with the guidelines.
Thank you, Lindsay. Is the applicant here when they'd like to speak?
Let's see.
Are they on Zoom or anything?
Let's see. They are not present.
They are not here. So I will open it up. Would anybody else like to speak from the audience? No? So I will open it up to the general board for discussion.
So if there's no one to ask questions to, it would be a difficult discussion, but one of my questions would be for them to address the base of wall if they are going to propose stucco, just how it meets the ground plane, because stucco can look like terrible after mowing the lawn once and just debris. And yeah, agreed on the windows. There seems to be too much going on the front with the arched windows and things like that. It's just a massive blank glass facade is not correct.
I'll make a motion to approve and also include Cameron's comment about bringing the stucco all the way to the ground and resolving that issue with staff.
Was the applicant trying to be here via Zoom and just couldn't?
I believe so. I had spoken to them. I know they intended to be here, but there may have been confusion about timing or something.
I usually like to see applicants actually present when they can be. Are they?
Yeah.
Do we know that they're out of town?
Well, we have a motion.
This is my further discussion part, I guess.
Well,
the motion.
Do we have any second?
Second.
Can you light up?
Second.
Okay. Do we have further discussion?
Is there concern from other board members that, I agree the windows need to change. I know that's part of the application, but should we see that in a drawing, or as long as they meet the similar scale and, I don't know, just that's a front feature that'll change the look of the building, which I'm fine with. I don't know if it's that concerning or not.
No, I think it needs
if
to
they were
have
here, I would say, how
staff
confident, what do you
approval.
feel about it, sort of thing.
I think someone needs to see it, so I'd say to add that it's not number 2 should have with staff review to see those updates.
Leave the window changes and stucco detailing to
basically.
staff review.
Yes.
Suzanne, would you like to add that to your motion?
Sure, but I'd like to clarify, when you make a stipulation like that as part of the staff recommendation, they do come back to you, right?
That's correct. I also review drawings submitted for permitting.
So I think that's built in, but I'm happy to amend that to say that I move to approve based on staff recommendations And also to clarify that the applicant bring the ground stucco condition and the window revisions to staff for review.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Motion passes. Thank you. Let's see, now we have 1800 St. Mary Street, 6D24IH.
So this is an addition. So just as a refresher, under the infill housing overlay, the DRB reviews additions visible from the primary street. So as you can see, this would be minimally visible due to slope and topography, but will be visible from St. Mary and Oak Hill Avenue. So this is a one-story addition. It'll be 35 feet wide by 35 feet 4 inches wide by 21 feet 4 inches deep. It'll project from the rear left corner of the house. So you can see in the elevation drawings, it will be set lower than the primary house and have a flat TPO roof, an exterior of a polished faced CMU, and a CMU foundation. The addition will feature a secondary entry on the northwest elevation, and there are adjoining double hung windows. The project also includes the installation of a new driveway. The addition is proposed for the rear corner of the house, which meets the guidelines for placement. It also maintains the guidelines for additions, say maintain the scale of the front facade, and it does do that. The house remains consistent with other houses on the block. This is obviously set way down. The guidelines also recommend that roof lines and roof cladding complement the house, and it has a flat roof, so it'll be minimally visible. Flat roofs are compatible with a ranch house. Guidelines also recommend that exterior cladding be compatible with those on the original house. So the application includes a polished concrete block comparable to the main house's red brick. While basic concrete block would not be supported by the design guidelines, it is a smooth finished concrete block with a color and or at least a finishing that's compatible with red brick. And the guidelines, finally, in terms of the site plan, the guidelines recommend that parking avoids the front yards and the parking pads be located behind the front facade of the house. The current parking, as you can see here called out in red, is actually being located in front of the house, and so these revised parking will move it away. Final site plan revisions may be necessary to meet city engineering standards. So the staff recommendation is to approve this with the condition that the site plan meets city engineering standards.
Thank you, Lindsay. Is the applicant here? Would you like to speak?
Yeah, I'm Forrest Kirkpatrick. I'm the architect for the homeowners. My address is 214 West Avenue. And Lindsay and I have worked together to get to this point, as well as we've had one meeting with city engineering. And I think we're on the same page to go into permitting and engineering, work out some of the details. But otherwise, I can answer any questions or have any discussion, but I agree with Lindsay's assessment.
All right, thank you. Would anybody else like to speak? Then I'll open it up for board discussion.
Forrest, thank you. Good quality submission. Appreciate that. Question for you is, I understand the material and I think it's appropriate. I see the option, the image has multiple colors, and then you have the darker one. You have a color chosen?
We don't at this point. We're working on getting samples from the manufacturer.
Okay.
And until we get the samples, we really don't want to
okay.
particularly specify. But it's going to be in the lighter gray to lighter red range. It's pretty broad, but
yeah.
Until we see the samples.
Okay. In an absence of a defined color, are you pretty confident in this material? Like I feel comfortable with the polished, and it doesn't. I mean, a gray could look just like a CMU, but it's smaller scale. But it is polished. It looks more refined. I think it's appropriate. I just didn't know if you're comfortable with this, or is this gonna, is there a possibility of another material? I'm not requesting another material. I'm just asking.
No, I understand. If we can look at the front elevation. our strategy, and we're getting a special use, or we're going for a special use with Planning Commission next month, for this to be a duplex. The original house is a CMU foundation, wood frame above, clad in brick, plaster finish on the inside. For it to be a duplex, we have to have 1 hour fire separation between the two. So this selection of material does a handful of things. Also, it's minimally visible from the street.
Yeah, exactly.
The house itself, the existing house, is very attractive as a standalone house, and we definitely don't want to compete with that. And this is also for the blending of two families. So when it comes to the selection of this particular CMU, it matches the construction of the house without competing with the aesthetic of the original house, so it pays homage to it in that way. It also inherently meets our fire separation requirements in one material. So it seemed like a very logical choice for this.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, I think this is it's a textbook submission and a thoughtful way to address a site, which is a pretty opportunistic or advantageous site given its size, its hill. I think you nestling the stone mass back there is thoughtful. It is somewhat hidden, which makes that much more interesting. And then have the alley behind it. So I think, I like this project, and I think it meets guidelines, and it's, like you said, submissive to the original architecture. Could you clarify on the existing parking pad at the back, are you infilling the garage doors with those windows and then the same block beneath those on the existing house? Is that what that is? You're trying to draw that material over?
Yes.
Okay. So that's because that's becoming living space on the interior now.
Yes.
Got it, okay.
And that's actually where there's two places in this project where the physical blending comes together, and one is in that downstairs area, and the other is in the northeast corner. There'll be a shared parking space.
What are you having to go to Planning Commission for?
We will need a special use for this to be a duplex.
Because the property's not in TDR, is that what it is? It's not?
Funnily enough, it's not.
Barely not in it.
It is in RA2, but it's not in TDR.
Okay, we don't have to go down that, I was just confused. All right.
Yeah, so it just gives the property more flexibility for accessory structures in the future, if this is a duplex as opposed to making it an accessory dwelling unit now.
Understood.
Due to the sort of tucked away hiddenness and the quality of material you proposed and the overall submission, I feel comfortable approving it without a defined color per se. So I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Second.
A second.
Okay, so we have a motion, and I believe Cameron got to the second first. So is there any more discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Okay. Now, this is our last submission, but we have some other stuff after that. Yeah, you gotta go in the back. 721 Oglewood Avenue, 6E24IH.
Okay.
Go ahead.
This is a primary structure fronting Oglewood Avenue. It's a 1 1/2 story residence with a front gable roof. There's a side gable massing projecting to the right side of the roof line, an exterior horizontal lap siding, and a stucco clad foundation. The building measures 30 feet wide by 54 feet deep, and there's a 10-foot deep full-length front porch recessed under the primary roof line. Parking is located to the rear and accessed from the alley. So the house is proposed to be set 30 feet from the front property line. The average of the block face is 33.5, so the proposed front setback will be consistent with the block. The final site plan should include a walkway from the front door to the sidewalk, Overall, the parking meets the infill housing design guidelines as it's located to the rear. The front, the one-story, three-bay facade meets the guidelines. It is proportionate to comparable houses in the neighborhood. There is a 10-foot deep front porch that overall meets the design guidelines for depth. There are depicted porch details here that should be retained in the final construction, including paired columns. The guidelines recommend that windows and door styles are similar to historic houses on the block. Overall, there are sufficient windows on all elevations. There are some windows here indicated as optional, and those should be included to avoid large swaths of siding with no transparency. The application doesn't specify the siding material, but does show horizontal lap siding. It should be a horizontal clapboard style lap siding. Guidelines typically recommend using materials compatible with the historic context. Historic exterior chimneys were not clad in lap siding, so the chimney should be clad in brick veneer or omitted. So staff's recommending approval of 6E24IH subject to the conditions that the final site plan meets city engineering standards. The final site plan include a walkway to the door, from the door to the sidewalk, and one tree each in the rear and front yards, and the exterior chimney be clad in brick or omitted.
Thank you for that, Lindsay. Doesn't look like the applicant's here. Are they on Zoom or anything? No. Okay. Looks like a pretty good submission, so I'll open it up for board discussion.
Well, you already got my pet peeve with the wood-clad chimney, so I think I would recommend approval of the staff recommendation.
I will second that.
You have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, I'll take a vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Thank you for your submission. And we have some business to take care of.
Sure.
Yes, since we have to do that as an open board, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we will start with accepting nominations for the chair and the vice chair in 2023 and 2024. And I'll just make a note that we accept the nominations now so you guys can kind of chew on it, and then we will vote at the next meeting. If there's someone that comes to mind between these two meetings and you haven't nominated them, that's fine. They can also be nominated and voted on at the next meeting. So I will start out with accepting nominations for chair for 2023 and 2024. Feel free to just throw out nominations or make a recommendation.
I would like to nominate Suzanne Terravelle.
4 to 25.
24 to 25, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I second that.
Leaving.
I know. Exactly.
One last.
Okay, do I hear any other ones?
Now, there can be nominations later.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes. This is not a
We
binding
think about it.
set of nominations. Okay. Well, feel free to continue to think on it. We can discuss that further too. And then I will now open the chair for nominations for 2024 to 2025.
I'd like to nominate Dr. Lynn.
No. I was about to nominate Jared for vice chair.
I'll second that.
I was
To
gonna
Dr.
nominate-
Lynn or to Jared or both?
Both of them. Co-chairs.
Co-chairs.
Jared.
No.
Or Laura, if she'd like to.
I was going to
No,
try
I'm
to
gonna-
nominate Cameron.
I'm gonna remove my name from the vice chair.
Okay, Jared, I'm seconding Jared's nomination.
I'll second Josh's nomination of Cameron.
So we have two nominations.
You have two multiple nominations for the
There was a lot of
position to be
talking
voted
going on,
on.
so I couldn't follow it.
Yeah, those two, yeah. Okay.
We have Josh and John nominating
Jared and Cameron.
Cameron, and we have Laura and Rick nominating. No, Laura and Rick nominated Jared.
Actually, Josh and Matthew. I nominated Laura, but she didn't want to do it, so
No, she doesn't.
it failed without a second.
Sure did. Quick.
Any more discussion? And of course, you guys can kind of work it out and whatever.
Do they give
And-
speeches?
No,
Campaign
I
ones?
guess they could. But just think about it, and if anybody else has a nomination, let Lindsay know, please. And then, is there any other board business we need to take care of? Yes. I guess I should close the board before we do all that. All right, and we will officially close this meeting, but stick around because we've got a lot more.